The fatal mistake. The stars sparkled brightly in the vastness of space. Among the many ships that roamed the galaxy, there was one ship that stood out, Erebus, a small human vessel. Its sleek black exterior seemed out of place in the empty space, and yet it glided silently through the cosmos. The crew aboard Erebus was calm, focused, and ready. They knew something big was coming. Far away, in the heart of the Haelor Empire, the great warship Kryden had just received a mission. It was not a usual mission. It was different. The Haelor Empire, a powerful and ruthless force, had decided to make an example of humanity. They believed humans were weak, primitive, and easy to defeat. The Kryden had been ordered to destroy a human vessel that had been detected near the Empire's borders. A simple mission, they thought. Nothing to worry about. In the Haelor War Council, the commanders sat around a long table. They were discussing the plan to attack. "This human ship," said General Varkas, the leader of the operation, "is just one vessel. It's no match for the might of the Haelor fleet. We'll strike fast, and they won't have a chance to react." The others nodded in agreement. The Haelor Empire had conquered countless worlds without much trouble. They had advanced technology, unmatched firepower, and a strong, loyal army. Humanity was nothing more than a nuisance. Back aboard Erebus, Captain Rena Hale stood in the bridge, staring at the galaxy map. She had been briefed on the Haelor Empire's movements. She knew the danger was real, but she was ready. The human crew on board Erebus had trained for this moment their entire lives. Rena wasn't afraid of the Haelor Empire. She was prepared to face them head-on. What the Haelor Empire didn't know was that Erebus was not an ordinary ship. It was the result of years of secret human research and technology. It was equipped with advanced weapons, shields, and a powerful artificial intelligence called Aegis. The Haelor Empire was in for a surprise. The Haelor fleet had arrived, and they were confident. The fleet consisted of several large warships, all built for one purpose: destruction. General Varkas stood on the deck of Kryden, staring at the distant human vessel through the observation window. The human ship was tiny compared to their mighty fleet. It almost seemed like a toy. But Varkas wasn't worried. He believed this would be an easy battle. "Prepare to fire," he ordered. A cold smile spread across his face as the Kryden aimed its massive weapons at Erebus. The Haelor fleet's first shot was a warning, just a burst of energy fired across the void of space. They expected the human ship to respond with fear and retreat. Instead, something unexpected happened. The Erebus didn't run. It didn't hesitate. In an instant, Erebus fired back, its weapons glowing bright against the darkness of space. The Haelor ships were not prepared for such a powerful response. The first blast hit Kryden, causing the ship to shake violently. The Haelor soldiers on board scrambled in panic as alarms blared throughout the warship. General Varkas couldn't believe it. "What is happening?" he shouted. His ship had been damaged, seriously damaged. This was no ordinary human vessel. The Erebus wasn't retreating or fleeing like they expected. It was fighting back, and it was winning. The Haelor commanders scrambled to respond. They ordered their ships to return fire, but Erebus was faster. It moved with a precision and speed that the Haelor fleet had never seen from a human ship. Rena Hale wasn't just a skilled captain. She had the advantage of Aegis, the ship's eye, which calculated every move, every angle, and every weakness of the Haelor fleet. Together, Rena and Aegis made the perfect team. On the Haelor flagship, Varkas paced back and forth, his mind racing. He had underestimated the humans. Full power to forward shields. "Prepare all weapons for a second strike," he ordered, but his orders were too slow. The Erebus fired again, this time hitting the engine core of one of the Haelor warships. The ship exploded in a brilliant burst of light, leaving nothing but debris in its wake. "Retreat. All ships retreat," Vargas yelled, but it was too late. The Haelor fleet, once confident in its power, was now retreating in panic. The Erebus was relentless, pushing forward with precision and skill. The damage to the Haelor fleet was significant. Their ships were scattered, their plans in disarray. What they had thought would be a simple mission was quickly turning into a disaster. The Erebus continued its attack, never relenting. Rena Hale knew that if she could destroy the flagship Kryton, the battle would be won. Back on Kryton, Vargas was furious. How did this happen? He couldn't understand it. How had this human ship, so small and weak, caused such destruction? He was faced with a choice: fight back and risk losing more ships or retreat, and live to fight another day. His pride told him to fight. His instincts told him to run. With a deep breath, General Vargas made the hardest decision of his career. Retreat. All ships, retreat now. But it was already too late for the Haelor Empire. The fatal mistake had been made. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. Secrets of the Erebus. The Kryton had retreated, but the Haelor fleet was not done. General Vargas, though humiliated, would not let his empire lose to a human ship. He had underestimated Erebus, and he intended to correct that mistake. But what the Haelor Empire didn't know was that Erebus was not just any ordinary ship. There was more to the human vessel than they could imagine. Captain Rena Hale stood at the bridge of Erebus, staring out at the stars. The battle was far from over. Her crew had done well to hold their ground, but they were not safe yet. The Haelor Empire would return. Rena could feel it. They would come back, stronger and angrier. She turned to her right, where a holographic display flickered with the ship's status. Aegis, the ship's advanced AI, was busy calculating their next move. The AI had been designed to handle every possible threat, making Erebus one of the most advanced ships in the galaxy. Aegis was not only the ship's brain, but also its heart. It guided Erebus through every decision, every calculation. Aegis' voice, calm and steady, echoed in Rena's ear. "Captain Hale, the Haelor fleet has already begun to regroup. Their next attack will come in approximately 12 hours. Rena nodded. "I know, Aegis. I can feel it too. But we'll be ready. We've got something they don't expect." She turned to the crew around her. "Listen up, everyone. The Haelor Empire is coming back, and this time they'll be angrier. We need to make sure we're ready for them. They've already learned not to underestimate us, but they still don't know everything about Erebus." The crew exchanged looks. What did she mean? What was it that the Haelor fleet didn't know? Rena's words had sparked curiosity, but there was no time for questions. Every member of the crew knew that time was running out. They had to prepare. Unknown to the Haelor Empire, Erebus was equipped with some of the most advanced technology humanity had ever created. The ship's weapons were powerful, yes, but its true secret lay in the defense systems. There was a hidden layer of cloaking technology that allowed Erebus to disappear from enemy sensors completely. This wasn't just a simple stealth system, it was much more. Aegis had developed a system that could predict enemy movements. This allowed Erebus to stay one step ahead of any attack. It could create false signals, confuse enemy targeting systems, and even make the ship seem like it was in multiple locations at once. These capabilities were not something the Haelor Empire could have known about, and they were going to be the key to their defeat. As Rena walked through the corridors of Erebus, she felt a sense of purpose that was different from the past. She had been a leader, a captain before. But now, after the first battle, she was something more. She was the symbol of humanity's strength. Her crew respected her, and they followed her every command with determination. They had already proven that they could fight. Now it was time to show the Haelor Empire that humanity could win. Meanwhile, on the Haelor flagship Crydon, General Varkas was boiling with rage. The retreat had been humiliating, and he had spent the last few hours plotting his next move. He couldn't believe how easily a human ship had crippled his fleet. Erebus was no longer just a target. It had become a symbol of resistance. He had to crush it, or he would lose all respect in the Empire. "I want Erebus destroyed," Varkas said to his commanders, his voice cold and angry. "Prepare the fleet for another assault. This time, we won't be caught off guard." His second-in-command, Lieutenant Croth, spoke up. "General, I believe we need to reconsider. The humans have something we don't fully understand. We should gather more intelligence before attacking again." Varkas shot him a sharp look. "You're questioning me, Croth. The Empire's power is unmatched. We will destroy them." Croth hesitated but said nothing more. Deep down, he felt uneasy about the attack. He had watched the battle, and he knew the Erebus wasn't just a simple ship. There was something different about it, something dangerous. Back on Erebus, Rena continued to strategize with Aegis. The Eye had already begun implementing new strategies to further strengthen the ship's defenses. But it wasn't just about defense. It was about knowing the enemy's weaknesses before they even had a chance to strike. "Captain Hale," Aegis interrupted her thoughts. "I have analyzed the Haelor fleet's movements. They are planning another attack. However, I have found a weakness in their formation. We can exploit it." Rena raised an eyebrow. "What kind of weakness?" "Their flagship, Crydon, has a vulnerability in its shield system. If we strike at precisely the right moment, we can disable their main weapon systems." Rena smiled. "Perfect. We'll use their overconfidence against them. It's time to turn the tables." The Erebus was ready, and so was Captain Rena Hale. The Haelor Empire had made their first mistake by underestimating humanity. Now they were about to make a second one, their belief that they could easily defeat Erebus. As the countdown began, the crew of Erebus prepared for the battle ahead. They knew that the Haelor fleet would not give up easily, but they were ready to fight for humanity's survival. No matter what happened, they would prove that the Haelor Empire's fatal mistake had only just begun. The Haelor strike back. The stars stretched endlessly before them, but the silence on Erebus felt heavy. The crew knew the Haelor fleet would return. Captain Rena Hale paced the bridge, her mind running through every possibility. They had been through the first wave, but the Haelor Empire was not a force to be taken lightly. They would strike again, and this time they would be more prepared. Rena turned to Aegis, the ship's eye, who had been quietly calculating their next moves. "Aegis, what's the situation?" Aegis's voice rang out through the bridge, calm and steady. "The Haelor fleet is regrouping. They will be ready for another assault in approximately 15 hours. I estimate they have upgraded their weapons and defensive systems, but they are still unaware of Erebus's full capabilities." Rena nodded, her mind already racing with strategies. The first battle had been a surprise to the Haelor fleet, but they would not make the same mistake again. This time, they would come prepared for a fight. She gathered her officers around her. "Listen up, everyone. The Haelor Empire won't give up. They've learned from their mistake, but they're still underestimating us. We're not just fighting to defend Erebus. We're fighting for the future of humanity." The crew nodded. They were ready. Meanwhile, on the Haelor flagship Crydon, General Varkas stared at the stars through the observation window. His mind was filled with anger. He couldn't believe how easily Erebus had caused so much damage. The humans had fought back in ways he never expected. He would not let that happen again. General, Lieutenant Cross spoke up, his voice cautious. "We need to be careful. The humans have a unique ship. Their tactics are unpredictable. Perhaps we should gather more intelligence before making another attack." Varkas turned sharply. "Enough, Kruth. We've already underestimated them once. If we wait too long, they'll grow stronger. We must strike now, before they have a chance to regroup fully. Our pride is at stake." Kruth remained silent. He didn't agree with Varkas, but he knew better than to argue further. The general's mind was made up. The Haelor Empire had already lost face in the first battle. This time, they would crush Erebus once and for all. The Haelor fleet moved into position, their ships powered up and ready to strike. Varkas's orders were clear: destroy Erebus and show the galaxy that the Haelor Empire could not be defeated. Back on Erebus, the crew was preparing for the coming battle. The ship was alive with movement as officers and crew members double-checked systems, fine-tuned weapons, and made sure everything was in place. Rena stood in front of the large screen on the bridge, studying the approaching Haelor fleet. "Aegis, what's their formation like?" The AI's calm voice answered, "The Haelor fleet is moving in a standard formation. They will attempt to surround us, forcing us into a corner. However, they have not accounted for Erebus's cloaking technology. We can slip past their lines and attack from behind." Rena's lips curled into a small smile. "Perfect. Let's make sure they regret underestimating us. We'll hit them hard and fast." The crew worked efficiently, readying the ship's weapons and activating the cloaking system. They had been through drills, but this would be the real test. Erebus had powerful weaponry, but its true advantage lay in its speed and agility. The Haelor fleet's heavy ships were slow, and their tactics were predictable. The countdown began. As the Haelor fleet closed in, Rena took a deep breath. She knew this would be a dangerous fight, but she had no doubt Erebus would emerge victorious. They had to. Humanity's future depended on it. The battle began. The Haelor fleet made its move, closing in on Erebus as expected. But just as they thought they had the human ship trapped, Erebus vanished. The cloaking technology had kicked in, and the ship became invisible to the Haelor sensors. "Where did it go?" Varkas shouted, slamming his fist on the console. "Find it. We cannot let them escape again." But it was too late. Rena and Aegis had already made their move. Erebus struck swiftly from the rear, launching a powerful barrage at the nearest Haelor ship. The blast hit hard, causing the ship to lose power and fall back. "Direct hit," reported one of the crew members on Erebus. "Their shields are failing." Rena's eyes narrowed. "Keep pushing. We're not stopping until they know who they're messing with." The Haelor fleet scrambled to adjust, but Erebus was too quick. Using its advanced cloaking, the human ship slipped between the massive Haelor warships, firing laser blasts and torpedoes that caused confusion and chaos among the enemy fleet. General Varkas watched in fury as his ships were damaged one by one. He had expected Erebus to be a simple target, but now it was clear that this human vessel, was unlike anything he had ever seen. "We have to stop them now," Varkas ordered. "Target Erebus and fire everything we have." The Haelor fleet launched a wave of attacks, but Erebus was already moving again. The ship's cloaking system made it nearly impossible to track. Rena's strategy was simple: hit hard and vanish before the Haelors could retaliate. Another blast struck a Haelor destroyer. The ship's hull cracked under the force of the attack. "Another one down," cheered one of the crew members. The crew's spirits were high, but Rena knew they couldn't afford to get too confident. The Haelor Empire was not going to back down easily. Just as Rena was about to give the order for another strike, a sudden wave of enemy fire hit Erebus directly. The ship shook violently, alarms blaring across the bridge. "Shields down to 40%, one of the officers shouted. Rena's heart raced, but she didn't hesitate. "Aegis, initiate evasive maneuvers. Get us out of here." In an instant, Erebus disappeared once more, using its cloaking technology to escape the Haelor fleet sights. The crew held their breath as they waited. The ship had been damaged, but it wasn't done yet. The battle was far from over. The Haelor Empire had made their move, but Erebus had struck back. General Varkas was enraged, and Rena knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger fight. The turning point. The battle raged on in the cold depths of space. Erebus moved like a shadow, striking swiftly and vanishing before the Haelor fleet could respond. The human ship had already caused significant damage to the Haelor warships, but the Haelor Empire was far from finished. Their fleet, though shaken, was still powerful and determined to crush Erebus once and for all. Captain Rena Hale stood at the bridge, her eyes locked onto the holographic display. The Haelor ships were regrouping again, their weapons powered up and their formations stronger than before. Rena's mind raced. They had been able to outmaneuver the Haelor fleet so far, but she knew that they couldn't keep this up forever. The Erebus had already sustained some damage, and they needed to end this soon. "Aegis," Rena said, her voice calm but focused. "How much longer can we keep up the hit-and-run tactics?" Aegis's voice replied, cool and collected. "At this rate, we can maintain our strategy for approximately 10 more minutes before we run low on energy reserves. The Haelor fleet is now fully aware of our tactics and is adjusting their formation to counter us." Rena clenched her fists. "We need a new plan. A decisive strike. We can't afford to keep running forever. It's time to turn the tide." The crew around her exchanged worried glances, but Rena's confidence was unwavering. They had already proved that Erebus could hold its own against the Haelor Empire. Now it was time to push for victory. On the Haelor flagship Crydon, General Varkas was in the midst of a heated discussion. The damage to his fleet was severe, but he refused to back down. His commanders and officers gathered around him, trying to come up with a solution. "General, Erebus is too fast," said Lieutenant Croft, looking over the latest reports. "We can't keep up with their movements. Our ships are too slow, and their cloaking technology makes it nearly impossible to target them." Varkas slammed his fist down on the table. "I don't care how fast they are. We've already been humiliated once. We will not lose to this tiny human ship. We have to find a way to trap them. I'll take that ship down myself if I have to." Croth hesitated. "General, we've lost several ships. If we don't act carefully, we'll lose more. The humans are too unpredictable." Varkas's eyes burned with anger. "We're Haelor. We don't back down. Prepare for a full assault. I'll show these humans what happens when they challenge the might of the Haelor Empire." Back on Erebus, Rena had already come up with a plan. She knew they couldn't continue this cat-and-mouse game with the Haelor fleet. It was time for them to make a stand. The only way to end the battle was to destroy the Haelor flagship, Crydon. If they could disable the command ship, the rest of the fleet would fall apart. "We've got one shot at this," Rena said, addressing her crew. "We're going after Crydon. If we take down their flagship, we take down their command structure. We can break their fleet." The crew nodded, their faces determined. They had all come to the same conclusion. The Haelor Empire might have superior numbers and strength, but Erebus had something they didn't: the ability to think and adapt on the fly. They weren't just going to win, they were going to outsmart the Haelor. Aegis, can you find a way to get us close to Kryton without being detected? Rena asked. Aegis's response was immediate. Yes, Captain. I've analyzed their fleet's sensor patterns. Kryton is vulnerable on the right side, where its shields are weaker. If we can move in from that direction, we may have a chance to strike. Rena's eyes sparkled with determination. Let's do it. All crew members, prepare for evasive maneuvers. This is our moment. The Erebus slipped silently through the darkness of space, moving toward the Haelor flagship. The Haelor fleet, still in formation, had no idea the human ship was creeping closer. Rena's plan was risky, but it was their best chance. The distance between Erebus and Kryton closed rapidly, and the Haelor ships remained oblivious. They thought Erebus would continue to fight from a distance, but Rena had no intention of making it easy for them. As they approached the Haelor flagship, Erebus cloaked itself again, just as it had done before. Aegis now, Rena ordered. With a soft hum, the cloaking device flickered off, and Erebus emerged from the shadows, now just a few kilometers away from Kryton. The Haelor ship had no time to react. Rena wasted no time. She gave the order to fire. The first blast hit Kryton's shield directly, causing the entire ship to shake. Erebus fired again, this time hitting the exposed right side of the ship where the shields were weaker. The blast tore through the Kryton's hull, creating a massive explosion. For a moment, Kryton seemed to freeze in space, smoke billowing from the wound in its side. Kryton is taking heavy damage, shouted one of the crew members. Rena's heart raced. Keep firing. We need to make sure they can't recover. On the Haelor flagship, General Varkas was in shock. The moment the first blast hit, he knew something had gone terribly wrong. How could they have gotten so close, he shouted. We're taking critical damage to the right side of the ship. One of his officers yelled. Shields are failing. Power systems are offline. Varkas gritted his teeth. He had been so sure that Erebus was nothing more than a nuisance. But now he realized how wrong he had been. The humans were not weak, and their ship was not to be underestimated. Damage control, Varkas screamed. Get our shields back online. Bring the weapons to full power. But it was too late. The Kryton was in a state of crisis. The crew scrambled to repair the ship, but Erebus was relentless. The human ship struck again, and the mighty flagship of the Haelor Empire shuddered once more. Back on Erebus, Rena stood with a grim look on her face. They had done it. Kryton was heavily damaged, and the Haelor fleet was in disarray. The tide of the battle had turned, and the Haelor Empire was beginning to realize just how costly their mistakes had been. Aegis, Rena said, what's the status of the Haelor fleet? Aegis replied, the Kryton is severely compromised. Many of the Haelor ships are retreating. The fleet is collapsing. Rena smiled, but her work was far from over. Prepare for pursuit. We're not letting them escape. This was the turning point. The Haelor Empire had thought they could easily crush humanity, but Erebus had shown them just how wrong they were. The balance of power had shifted, and now the Haelor fleet was retreating, its pride shattered. But the battle wasn't won yet. Rena Hale knew there was still more to come, the final gambit. The Erebus had dealt a powerful blow to the Haelor Empire, but the battle was far from over. General Varkas was on the brink of defeat, but he wasn't ready to give up. He had watched as his fleet faltered, but now he had one last chance to turn the tide. The Kryton was severely damaged, but Varkas still had a card to play. A final gambit that could crush Erebus and wipe out humanity's hope for victory. Captain Rena Hale stood on the bridge, her eyes focused on the battle ahead. The Haelor fleet was retreating, but she knew better than to believe the fight was over. The Haelor Empire had too much pride to simply give up. They would come back with everything they had left. Aegis, Rena said, her voice steady, status report. Aegis's calm voice filled the room. The Haelor fleet is in disarray, Captain. However, I detect a new threat. The Krydon is preparing to launch a final attack. They have initiated a self-destruct sequence, aiming to take us down with them. Rena's heart skipped a beat. A self-destruct? The Krydon was the heart of the Haelor fleet. If it detonated, it could destroy everything within a large radius. Can we stop it? Rena asked quickly, her mind racing. Aegis hesitated. The self-destruct sequence is highly advanced. It is likely tied to the flagship's main reactor. Disabling it will require precise coordination. Rena's grip tightened on the armrest of her chair. They couldn't afford to lose Erebus now, not when victory was within reach. She turned to her crew. Listen up, everyone. The Haelor fleet may be falling apart, but they've got one last move. The Krydon is going to explode, and if we don't stop it, the shockwave could destroy us all. We need to find a way to disable the self-destruct, and we need to do it now. The crew sprang into action, each person moving with purpose. They had faced danger before, but this was something different. The Krydon wasn't just another warship, it was the key to everything. If it exploded, it would send a message to the galaxy that the Haelor Empire could still defeat humanity, no matter how much damage they had taken. On board the Krydon, General Varkas stood in front of the control panel, his hands shaking with fury. He had lost so much. His fleet was in retreat, his flagship was on the verge of destruction, and the humans had humiliated him. But Varkas had one final chance to exact revenge. Captain, Varkas shouted to the officers around him, prepare the final strike. We will take Erebus with us. Even if we die, we will ensure humanity's destruction. The officers looked at him, fear and doubt in their eyes. They knew that the Krydon's self-destruct would mean the end for them as well, but they also knew the price of failure. They couldn't afford to show weakness. General, one of the officers spoke up hesitantly, the self-destruct is already activated. It's only a matter of time before it detonates. We can't stop it without risking an immediate chain reaction. Varkas turned toward him, his eyes blazing with rage. Then we will make sure Erebus goes down with us. If we can't defeat them, we'll destroy them. He slammed his fist on the control panel, and the countdown began. Back on Erebus, the crew worked quickly to disable the Haelor self-destruct. The tension in the air was thick as Rena and her officers scrambled to come up with a solution. Every second counted. They had no idea how much time they had left before the Krydon detonated. Aegis, Rena said urgently, can you find a way to override the self-destruct? Aegis's voice was calm, but there was a hint of urgency. I have located the core control system. However, it is heavily guarded by the Krydon's security systems. If we attempt to interfere, it could trigger the self-destruct prematurely. Rena knew they had no choice. They had to try. Prepare the hacking protocols. We don't have time for anything else. The crew set to work, following Aegis's instructions. They sent a series of encrypted commands to the Krydon, trying to break through its defenses. But the Haelor flagship systems were designed to stop any attempt to sabotage the self-destruct. It felt like they were fighting against a ticking clock with no way to win. On the Haelor flagship, the countdown continued. The seconds ticked away. General Varkas watched with satisfaction, knowing that he had done everything in his power to bring about humanity's destruction. The self-destruct was inevitable now. There was no turning back. But then a voice interrupted his thoughts. "General," said one of his officers, "we're receiving a signal from Erebus. They're trying to hack into our systems." Vargas's eyes widened with realization. The humans were attempting to stop the self-destruct. "Activate the defense systems," he ordered. "Lock down all access to the core." The officers scrambled to do as commanded, but it was too late. The humans were quick, and the Erebus crew was already halfway through disabling the self-destruct. Rena's fingers flew over the controls as Aegis guided her every move. It was a race against time. The Haelor defense systems fought back fiercely, but Erebus had the upper hand. They had hacked into the Krydon's core control systems, slowly gaining control. "I'm in," Aegis's voice said at last. "I've bypassed the security. The self-destruct is deactivated." Rena exhaled in relief. "We did it." But their victory was short-lived. The Krydon was still badly damaged, and the Haelor fleet was in disarray. General Vargas, knowing that his empire had been humiliated beyond repair, made one final desperate decision. "Captain, it's over," Aegis said quietly. "The Haelor fleet has retreated. The Krydon is lost." Rena stood at the bridge, her face a mask of calm, but inside she felt a rush of triumph. They had done it. The Haelor Empire had failed. Not only had they held their ground, but they had also defeated one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. Erebus had proven that humanity would not back down. They would fight until the end. "Captain," one of the officers said, "we've won. The Haelor Empire is retreating. It's over." Rena nodded. She could feel the weight of their victory, but she also knew that this was just the beginning. The Haelor Empire might have been defeated, but the galaxy was full of dangers. Erebus had earned this victory, but they would always have to be ready for the next battle. As the Haelor fleet limped away into the distance, Rena looked out at the stars. The war was over. For now, the Haelor retreat. The tension in space was palpable. The Krydon, the flagship of the Haelor Empire, was damaged beyond recognition. It had tried to self-destruct to take down Erebus, but thanks to Captain Rena Hale and her crew, the humans had managed to stop it just in time. The Haelor fleet had lost its nerve, and now their ships were retreating, trying to regroup and escape. On board Erebus, the atmosphere was quiet. The crew could feel the weight of their victory, but there was no time to celebrate. The Haelor Empire might have been pushed back, but the war was far from over. "Captain," said Aegis, the ship's AI, "I've analyzed the data. The Haelor fleet is in full retreat. Most of their ships are pulling back to the outer rim of their territory. However, they are not entirely gone. They will regroup and possibly return stronger." Rena took a deep breath. She had known the Haelor Empire was not easily defeated. "How much time do we have before they reorganize?" she asked. "According to my calculations, it could take them several weeks to recover fully," Aegis replied. "However, they will likely try to rebuild their forces quickly." Rena nodded. "We need to be ready. We can't rest on our victory just yet. They'll be back, and when they return, we'll be ready to face them." On the Haelor flagship Krydon, General Vargas sat in his command chair, his face a mask of fury. The humans had outsmarted him. They had taken down his flagship and had destroyed his pride. The thought of retreating disgusted him, but it was clear there was no other choice. His fleet had been shattered. "General," said one of his officers, "the fleet is in full retreat. We've lost several ships, and our forces are scattered. Should we continue pulling back to the outer rim as planned?" Vargas clenched his fists. "Yes. Fall back and regroup. We can't afford any more losses. But this isn't over. We will rebuild, and when the time comes, we will return to crush those humans." His officers nodded in agreement, knowing there was no arguing with him. They had failed, but they would learn from their mistakes. Varkis's eyes burned with a desire for revenge. Back on Erebus, the crew worked quickly to assess the damage to their own ship. Though they had stopped the self-destruct and defeated the Haelor flagship, Erebus had also taken some damage. The hull had sustained multiple hits, and a few systems were offline. But none of that mattered now. They had won. Captain, said one of the engineers, "We've repaired the critical systems, but it will take some time to fully restore Erebus to its original condition. We'll need a few days of rest." Rena looked around at her crew. They were all exhausted, but they had earned this moment. They had faced the might of the Haelor Empire and had come out victorious. "I don't care if it takes a week to fix the ship. Everyone deserves a rest. But we need to stay vigilant. The Haelor Empire will come back, and when they do, we'll be ready." The crew cheered, a feeling of pride sweeping over them. They had won today, but Rena's words reminded them that they couldn't let their guard down. The galaxy was vast, and other dangers could be waiting. Meanwhile, in the Haelor Empire's distant command center, Varkis began to formulate a plan. He knew it would take time to rebuild, but he was determined to wipe out Erebus and the humans once and for all. The humiliation of his defeat still stung, but it would only make him more dangerous. "We'll need more resources," he said, staring at a map of the galaxy. "We've underestimated humanity, but now we know their strength. The next time, we'll have the numbers and the firepower to end this once and for all." Back on Erebus, Captain Rena sat alone in her quarters, looking out at the stars. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. She thought about the people on her ship, the brave souls who had fought alongside her, and she felt a deep sense of pride. But there was something more, something unsettling. She couldn't shake the feeling that the Haelor Empire wasn't finished with them yet. The Erebus was still in one piece, and that meant one thing: they had a chance. They had survived the impossible. But Rena knew better than anyone that this was only the beginning. The Haelor Empire might have retreated, but they would return. And when they did, it wouldn't just be Erebus they were after. It would be all of humanity. "We've won this round," Rena muttered to herself. But the fight is far from over. The Haelor retreat was the first victory for humanity, but it had come at a price. The Erebus had proven itself, but so had the Haelor Empire. They were not a force that could be taken down easily, and their thirst for revenge would only grow stronger. As Erebus continued its journey through the stars, Captain Rena Hale knew the future was uncertain. The Haelor Empire would rebuild, but so would humanity. The battle lines had been drawn, and it was clear that the next chapter in the war for the galaxy would be even more intense. For now, though, they could breathe a little easier. The Erebus had survived, and humanity had won a hard-fought victory. But the question remained: how long could they hold out before the Haelor Empire returned to finish what they had started? The gathering storm. The stars stretched out across the vast expanse of space, endless and cold. The Erebus floated in the quiet, surrounded by the dark emptiness. Captain Rena Hale stood on the bridge, her eyes scanning the vast emptiness ahead. Despite the victory, a feeling of unease lingered in her chest. It had been days since the battle with the Haelor Empire, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming, something far worse. "Aegis, status report," Rena ordered, trying to focus on the present. Aegis's calm, digital voice answered immediately. "All systems are stable, Captain. We've completed repairs to 75%. The crew is recovering, but morale remains high after our victory." Rena nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. The Erebus had won the battle, but she knew deep down that this was just a brief lull in the storm. The Haelor Empire wasn't finished. They were planning their next move, and when they returned, they would be stronger. On the edge of the galaxy, in the depths of Haelor space, General Varkas stood before a new map of the stars. The Kryton had been crippled, but the Haelor Empire was far from defeated. They had suffered a humiliating loss, but they still had power. They still had ships, soldiers, and the desire to crush humanity once and for all. "We can rebuild," Varkas muttered, his voice cold and determined. "We will rebuild stronger than before. This time, there will be no mercy." The room was silent as his officers stood in attention. They knew the stakes. They had failed, but the Haelor Empire was relentless. They would not stop until they had crushed the humans. "Prepare the fleet," Varkas commanded. "We need more firepower, more ships. Start with the Kryton's replacement. It must be even more powerful than the last one. We will return, and when we do, we will bring hell to Erebus and every human colony in our way." The officers nodded, knowing the war was far from over. They had a long road ahead, but they would do whatever it took to regain their honor and crush the human resistance. Back on Erebus, Rena sat in her quarters, her mind racing. She had tried to sleep, but the events of the past days kept playing over and over in her mind. The Haelor Empire was a powerful enemy, and they would never forget the humiliation they had suffered. They would come back, and this time, they would be prepared. She knew the Erebus wasn't invincible. They had barely survived the first encounter, and while they had made repairs, they couldn't afford to be complacent. The next battle would be even more dangerous. "Captain," Aegis interrupted her thoughts, "we've detected unusual activity along the border of Haelor space. Fleet movements are being reported. We believe the Haelor Empire is preparing for another attack." Rena's heart sank. How soon? "It could happen within the next few days," Aegis replied. "They are assembling a new fleet. We estimate it could be twice the size of the previous one." Rena's mind raced as she absorbed the information. She had known this day would come, but now that it was here, she felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. "We need to be ready," she said firmly. "Alert the crew. Get the Erebus fully operational. We're going to need every bit of firepower we have." On the outer rim of Haelor space, a massive fleet began to form. The Haelor Empire had learned from its mistakes. The ships they were assembling were stronger, faster, and more deadly. The Kryton's replacement, the Dominion, was already nearing completion. It was a warship like no other, built to take on the best humanity had to offer. General Varkas stood on the command deck of a new flagship, the Dominion. His eyes were locked on the vast fleet before him, an army ready to crush humanity once and for all. He knew the humans were not weak, but he had learned from their tactics. The Haelor Empire had evolved. Now they were ready. "We will make them regret ever crossing us," Varkas whispered to himself. "This time, there will be no mercy. We will make Erebus pay for every ship we lost." Back aboard Erebus, the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for the inevitable battle. Captain Rena Hale had called for a meeting with her senior officers. They had a short window of time to make sure everything was in place before the Haelor Empire returned with a vengeance. "We know the Haelor Empire is coming," Rena began, her voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. "They've rebuilt, and this time they'll be stronger. We have to be ready to fight them off once more. Every crew member, every officer must be prepared for the worst. We'll give them a fight they'll never forget," Lieutenant Mathis said with a fierce smile. Rena nodded. "We're not just defending Erebus. We're defending humanity. This is about more than just our ship. It's about our future. If we lose this fight, we lose everything." The officers nodded in agreement. They had fought hard for this victory, and they would fight even harder to protect what they had built. The days passed quickly, and soon Erebus was ready. The crew had made every necessary adjustment to the ship's weapons and shields. The Erebus was now one of humanity's strongest warships, but Rena knew that even with the ship's upgrades, they couldn't afford to underestimate the Haelor Empire. "We'll need to think smarter this time," she said to her officers. "The Haelor are dangerous, and they've learned from their mistakes. We can't expect the same kind of victory as last time." Her team nodded in agreement. It wasn't just about firepower. It was about tactics. They needed to outsmart the Haelor if they were going to survive the coming storm. The Haelor fleet was ready. General Varkas stood at the front of his new flagship, Dominion, watching as the ships lined up behind him. His heart burned with a desire for revenge. The humans had embarrassed him, but now it was his turn to make them suffer. "We go to war," Varkas said, his voice cold and commanding. "We finish what we started. This time, there will be no mercy." With that, the Haelor fleet surged forward, heading toward Erebus and humanity's final stand. As the Haelor fleet moved toward the human territories, the battle lines were drawn once more. Erebus was ready, but the storm was gathering. The galaxy would soon be a battleground once again, and Captain Rena Hale knew the fight for humanity's survival was about to reach its most dangerous chapter. The Haelor Empire had learned. They were stronger. They were angrier. And this time, they were ready.